All right, today we're going deep, really deep, into this concept of Bai.
Oh, Bai.
From traditional Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're looking at Chapter 43 of the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine.
Classic.
I think this is going to change how we think about those everyday aches and pains we all get. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it's so fascinating, because when we think about this concept of Bai, it's often translated as obstruction or sometimes even arthritis. But what I think is really incredible about it is how it goes beyond just addressing the symptoms. It really brings in this idea of the interconnectedness of, your physical body, the environment you're in, even your emotions, to give us a more holistic perspective.
So, I mean, instead of just like, oh, I've got a pain, take a pill for it, we're really going to look at what's going on underneath, like what's causing this kind of thing.
Yeah, getting to the root of it, right? Yeah. And so this source, it describes Bai as this obstruction that's caused by these forces of wind, cold, and dampness. And these elements, they're almost like invaders, that come in and disrupt the body's natural flow of energy.
Interesting.
And that's what leads to, all these different kinds of pain and discomfort that people experience.
Okay, so I'm kind of picturing these elements almost like weather patterns, inside the body.
I love that. Yeah.
But I mean, why would some people experience BD as like a sharp stabbing pain, whereas others feel, kind of a deep, persistent ache? I mean, what's going on there?
That's where the interplay of these elemental forces comes in, right? So depending on which one is more dominant, you're going to get a different type of Bai with its own unique characteristics.
Right.
So for example, you have something like wandering Bai, which is very much led by that wind force. And that might feel like pain that moves around. It's not in one place.
Okay.
But then you might have painful Bai, which is more dominated by cold, and that could manifest as that deep penetrating ache that you were describing.
Okay. So it's like the type of pain kind of gives us clues about what's energetically happening.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insightful.
In this text, it goes even further. It suggests that Bai can manifest differently depending on what season you're in.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait, so are you saying like my winter aches and pains, they could be different from my summer aches and pains, even if they feel similar on the surface?
Yeah, because the source suggests that each season has its own type of Bai, and they each affect the body in unique ways.
Okay, so now I'm really intrigued.
Yeah.
So break it down for me. What are these seasonal variations of Bai, and what do they tell us about how it actually works?
Okay, so let's start with bone Bai.
Okay.
This one's associated with wintertime.
Oh, okay.
And it often shows up as these deep aches.
Yeah.
It's almost like an old injury is resurfacing.
Oh, I know that feeling.
Right.
When it gets cold, it's like those old aches come back to haunt me.
Exactly. And then you have tendon Bai, which is linked to springtime.
That stiffness you feel after sitting too long. Or that kind of limited range of motion that makes it tough to stretch.
Oh, yeah. Definitely familiar with that, especially, as someone who's not exactly a spring chicken anymore.
And then as we move into the summer months, we have what the source calls vessel Bai.
Vessel Bai.
Yeah, so this can involve some circulation problems and sometimes even discomfort in the heart.
Oh.
Summer's the season where the heat can sometimes feel a little overwhelming, right? It can even affect our cardiovascular system.
Right. So like our internal experience of Bai is actually mirroring what's happening in nature.
Exactly.
That's such a fascinating connection.
Yeah. And that idea of mirroring continues as we go into late summer with something called muscle Bai.
Muscle Bai.
Yeah. That time of year when you just feel more sluggish and fatigued, almost like your limbs are made of lead.
Yeah.
That's muscle Bai.
Okay. I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Right?
But what about autumn? Does Bai shift yet again?
Yes, it does. Autumn brings us skin Bai, which is interesting. It shows up as this heightened sensitivity to temperature and even touch.
Oh, wow.
Imagine feeling those subtle shifts in the air more intensely, or even experiencing discomfort from certain fabrics that never bothered you before.
Huh. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
It's like our skin becomes a barometer for the changing seasons.
I like that.
So, but this brings up a question for me.
Yeah.
We're talking about these elements, wind, cold, dampness. They're essentially external forces, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if they penetrate deeper into the body? Does Bai become more serious then?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to look at next.
Right.
Because according to this text, when Bai hangs around for a while, it can move beyond those superficial levels of just muscles and tendons, you know?
Okay.
It can actually start to affect the internal organs.
Oh, so this is where things get a little more intense.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about like, those aches and pains anymore.
Right.
We're talking about potential dysfunction on like a deeper level.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that each organ, according to this source, seems to react to Bai in its own unique way.
Right.
And sometimes the symptoms that come up are kind of surprising.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You've definitely piqued my curiosity. Let's delve into this internal landscape of Bai then.
Yeah, let's do it.
Explore how these deeper imbalances might manifest. This could get pretty wild.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're going deeper now, huh? Exploring how this Bai can impact the internal organs. I'm kind of, I don't know, apprehensive, I guess, but also really curious. What does this text tell us about how these deeper imbalances show up?
It's definitely, it's a different way of thinking about things, right? Moving away from just like, your knee hurts, your back hurts,
Right.
to this more subtle level of like what's happening with the organs themselves. But it is fascinating how each organ seems to have its own kind of unique relationship with Bai, according to the text.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. Give me an example. How would Bai manifest in, say, the lungs? I mean, I guess I would think breathing difficulties, but is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Breathing difficulties would be kind of, an expected symptom.
Right.
Given the lungs, that's their main thing, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is the source also describes things like a feeling of fullness in the chest and even vomiting.
Vomiting. That seems like a really strange symptom for a lung issue.
It might seem surprising, at first glance, but when you think about the lung's role in traditional Chinese medicine, it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Okay.
Because in TCM, the lungs, they're not only responsible for respiration, but they're also really involved in regulating fluids throughout the body.
Oh, okay.
So when Bai comes in and obstructs the lungs' energy, it can mess with that fluid regulation, and you can see things like vomiting popping up.
Okay, that's a really interesting connection. It shows how Bai isn't just about, pain in a specific spot.
Mm-hmm.
It can actually disrupt, the body's systems in these really complex ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And this connection between, organ function and Bai, we see it even more when we look at how Bai impacts the heart.
Okay, all right. So what happens when Bai targets the heart? I imagine we're talking about more than just physical symptoms, right? I mean, given how the heart's associated with emotions.
Yeah, you're right on the money there. Well, the source does mention things like pulse irregularities, which we would think of as a physical symptom.
Right.
It also highlights emotional experiences, so things like anxiety,
Okay.
and even a feeling of dread. As potential ways that Bai affecting the heart could manifest.
Because we're talking about like a real mind-body connection here.
Yeah, exactly.
Where the obstruction caused by Bai, it can actually influence how we feel emotionally.
That's the idea, yeah. And that connection becomes even, I think, stronger when we look at the liver. So the source describes Bai affecting the liver as showing up through, like, restless sleep, excessive thirst.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this interesting description of an internal pulling sensation.
Internal pulling. I don't even know what that would feel like.
Yeah, it's one of those descriptions that really kind of highlights the unique language that traditional Chinese medicine uses.
Right.
It's, hard to find a precise modern equivalent, but it speaks to this idea of like a disruption of the liver's energy.
Okay.
Potentially leading to, some kind of a discomfort or imbalance it's hard to put into words that we would normally use in conventional medicine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to really appreciate how this ancient text offers just like a whole different way of understanding the body and its inner workings. So what about the kidneys? How does Bai affect them?
So with the kidneys, the source connects Bai to symptoms like swelling, which I guess we would kind of expect, thinking about their role in fluid balance.
Right.
But then it gets a little weird.
Oh, here we go.
It also describes this really, really strange sensation. It says, sitting on your heels with your spine seemingly replacing your head.
Okay, that sounds anatomically impossible. Is that meant to be a literal description?
It's definitely a striking image.
Yeah.
And it probably points to like a disruption of the kidney's energetic function, but in a way that's really hard to explain, honestly. It could be like a metaphorical description, you know, meant to give you a sense of the imbalance or disorientation that comes up when bi affects the kidneys.
Okay, this is really challenging my Western, understanding of anatomy and physiology, but it's so fascinating. Okay, so we've done the lungs, the heart, liver, kidneys. What about the spleen? How does bi show up there?
The spleen, it's interesting. According to this text, it's particularly affected by bi that's coming from like overexertion and worry.
Okay.
So when its energy gets obstructed, the source suggests it can show up as things like limb weakness, coughing, and this feeling of blockage in the upper body.
So pushing ourselves too hard, like physically and mentally, can actually make it easier for Bay to take hold in the spleen.
That's a key point here, yeah.
Wow.
The source is really emphasizing this direct connection, right, between our lifestyle choices, our emotional state, and how Bay could mess with the spleen's function. It's really highlighting that interconnectedness.
Yeah, this is really starting to resonate with me. It's not just abstract concepts. We're talking about how the way we live, how we feel emotionally, can actually set the stage for Bay to manifest in these very specific ways.
And that's what makes this ancient text so relevant, even today.
Yeah.
It's this reminder that our bodies aren't just these isolated things. They're these complex systems, and they respond to everything. The environment, our emotions, our choices.
Okay, so we've explored how bi can impact all these different organs, often in ways that, we wouldn't think of with our kind of conventional medical understanding.
Yeah.
But that brings up this really important question.
Yeah.
If bi can be influenced by emotions, by lifestyle choices, by the seasons even, does that mean that we can do something about it?
That's the $1 million question.
Right.
And it leads us into this, I think, one of the most fascinating parts of this text, which is the role of emotions as potential pathogens.
Okay.
It might sound a little out there, but it speaks to this level of mind-body connection that we're, I think, only beginning to really understand.
Right. You have me officially hooked.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this link then between emotions and the potential for bi to take hold.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've been talking about this really interesting idea that emotions can actually play a part in how bi develop. And I mean, this is really where this ancient wisdom, from traditional Chinese medicine, it really challenges, I think, a lot of our modern assumptions about health and illness.
It definitely pushes us to think beyond just the physical, right? To consider like how our emotions, our inner world could actually be impacting our physical well-being. And what the source is suggesting is that just like those external forces we talked about, wind, cold, dampness, they can mess with the body's balance. It's saying that internal forces, things like worry, grief, anger, can also contribute to bi developing.
So we're really saying that emotions themselves can be like a catalyst for these blockages and imbalances.
Yeah, it's a pretty, radical concept.
It is.
But when we really consider, this mind-body connection, it starts to make a lot of sense. And the source, it actually connects specific emotions to specific organs, highlighting the energetic pathways that can get disrupted when we experience these emotions too much, or if we just let them kind of sit there unresolved. Okay,
this is where I need you to break it down for me.
Right.
Like, which emotions are we talking about here, and how do they actually relate to these different organs that we were discussing earlier?
All right, so let's start with the lungs, which we said, can be affected by showing up as those breathing difficulties, the fullness in the chest, even vomiting.
All right.
So the source, it links the lungs to excessive breathing, like when we're anxious or stressed.
Oh, okay.
And it says that can create this imbalance in the lungs, making them more vulnerable to bi.
That makes sense. When we're anxious, we tend to breathe like really shallowly.
Yeah.
Almost like we're like holding ourselves back.
Right. Like you're not fully inhaling life.
Right. Exactly.
And that pattern, it can actually mess with the lungs' energy and potentially lead to bi.
Okay. So then what about the heart?
So the heart, the source connects it to worry and sadness.
Okay.
And it suggests that, when we dwell on those negative thoughts,
Right.
or if we let grief just kind of overwhelm us, that can weaken the heart's energy and make it more susceptible to
So it's not about like never feeling those negative emotions. It's more about like finding a healthy way to process them.
Exactly.
So they don't like get stuck and create blockages.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging that, feeling them.
Yeah.
But not letting them take over.
Right.
And define us.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about the kidneys?
So the kidneys, they're linked to fear.
Okay.
The source is saying that living in that state of chronic fear can deplete the kidneys' energy and make them more susceptible to Bai.
Yeah, I mean, fear is such a basic instinct, right?
Yeah.
It's there to protect us, but when it's like constantly there, it can really take a toll.
Absolutely. And that connection between fear and the kidneys,
Yeah.
it shows how even like those basic survival instincts can
Right.
become imbalanced and actually contribute to illness if we're not careful.
Wow, this is all feeling very, very relevant, I think, to how we live today.
I know, right?
With so much stress and anxiety and fear,
Yeah.
it's like we're almost creating the perfect environment for Bai to thrive.
It's a little bit sobering.
It is.
But it also emphasizes, I think, how important it is to build up that emotional resilience and find those healthy ways of coping with the challenges that we all face.
Okay, so we've done lungs, heart, kidneys. What about the liver?
The liver, it's associated with anger and frustration.
Okay.
So holding on to resentment, letting anger just fester, or feeling constantly frustrated, these things can disrupt the liver's energy and potentially lead to Bai.
I've definitely felt that tightness, that constriction in my chest and shoulders when I'm holding on to anger. It's almost like a physical manifestation of that emotional tension.
Exactly. And that connection between the liver and anger, it's a powerful reminder that those unprocessed emotions, they can literally become embodied, create blockages and imbalances.
Okay, so we've done lungs, heart, kidneys, liver. What about the spleen? What emotions does the source link to the spleen?
So the spleen, it's interesting. It's particularly vulnerable to Bai that comes from overexertion and worry.
Okay.
So pushing ourselves too hard, whether it's physically or mentally or constantly dwelling on those anxious thoughts, that can weaken the spleen's energy and make it susceptible to Bai.
So finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Between effort and rest, between activity and stillness.
Absolutely.
That's key for the spleen.
It is. The source really highlights the importance of moderation, of self-care, of really listening to our bodies and respecting our limits. It's this reminder that true health comes from that harmony of all the different aspects of ourselves, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's incredible how this ancient text offers such a deep understanding of how everything's connected.
Right.
Our bodies, our emotions, the environment.
It's a testament to that ancient wisdom of observing the patterns in nature and recognizing that dance between what's happening inside of us and what's happening around us.
Right. And it really shows us that we have a lot more power to influence our own health than we might think.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here? What can our listeners take away from this exploration of Bai?
I think the most important takeaway is awareness.
Okay.
By understanding how our emotion, our choices, even the seasons, can make us more or less susceptible to Bai.
Yeah.
We can start making choices that support our well-being. Right. It's about tuning in to what's happening in our bodies. Yeah. Paying attention to how we're feeling emotionally. And just making those adjustments to stay in balance.
It's like we've been given this map to navigate our own health with a better understanding of like where the pitfalls are and how to build resilience.
Exactly. And while this ancient text, it gives us all of these amazing insights, it's really up to each of us to take that wisdom and apply it to our own lives, to really be active participants in our own healing.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
I think we've all learned a lot about Bai and just the incredible wisdom of traditional Chinese medicine. Yeah,
it's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Absolutely.
And I hope our listeners, they come away from this with a new appreciation for how everything's connected and feeling empowered to create more balance and well-being in their lives.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the world of bio.
My pleasure.
Until next time, may you find harmony, both within and without,